Welcome to Short Movie Channel. Our movie today begins inside a hospital with a nurse named Joan, who enters a room to check on an elderly female patient. Joan starts to turn off the oxygen tube, smiling widely while the woman dies right in front of her. Joan leaves the room and asks for help from her colleagues in the hospital. They come in and begin trying to resuscitate the woman, attempting to get her breathing again. Joan stands by the door, watching them, which catches the attention of Dr. Claire, who notices Joan standing there calmly. Fortunately, they manage to save the woman before she dies. Of course, Joan is very upset and decides to leave. Next, we go to a man named Ted and his wife Mira, who have a son named Max. Max is ill and uses crutches to walk. They're having breakfast together with Joan, Max's nurse, and it's clear from Joan's glances at Max that she is attracted to him. There's even some envy and resentment in her eyes as she watches them interact. Max's crutch falls to the floor as he's eating, and Joan quickly grabs it and helps him, making sure it's in a position to support him more. This only strengthens their attachment to her, and she begins to act sweetly toward their son Max. As Max gets ready to go to work, Mira adjusts his tie. Joan watches with a look of jealousy and disdain. After a while, Myra's friend Karen visits, and she notices how Joan is interacting with Max. She overhears Mira talking to Karen, saying how much Max loves Joan and is really attached to her. However, Karen feels uneasy about Joan despite all the praise and asks Mira why she chose this particular nurse. Mira replies that Joan came to them without being asked. While they're talking, they hear Max screaming, and they rush to him, finding him lying on the floor. Mira wants to call Dr. Claire, but Joan tells her it's not necessary and that Max is fine. Mira asks Joan if she didn't notice anything unusual, and Joan, coldly, responds that she was watching him, and he just fell. Max starts defending Joan, insisting that she did nothing wrong. Mira then calls Dr. Claire, asking for a new crutch since the old one broke. Later that night, Mira apologizes to Joan for getting upset with her, and Joan accepts her apology, offering to make her dinner and letting her relax. She also offers to make Mira a special cup of tea. Later, we go to a physical therapy and mental rehabilitation center where Mira shares her story with a group about her son's muscular dystrophy. She talks about how he was starting to improve until he fell yesterday, and she began to feel like she was failing him. Mira returns home to find that Joan has already made her tea. Mira thanks Joan for her care, drinks the tea, and falls asleep on the couch. The doorbell rings, and Dr. Claire arrives with the new crutch. Joan opens the door, and Dr. Claire begins to praise her. Myra's husband also thanks Joan, and Joan says that Mira is asleep right now. Dr. Claire asks Joan to try the crutch with Max, but Joan replies that Max is also asleep. So, Dr. Claire has to leave. Before leaving, Dr. Claire asks if they've met before, and Joan says they haven't. Dr. Claire leaves, but she's still suspicious. That night, Joan tells Mira that she remembered where they met, and Dr. Claire asks her to join her in the kitchen, where she's preparing dinner, so they can talk. Joan enters and closes the door behind her, holding a syringe filled with poison. She starts to think about what to do and remembers Dr. Claire, realizing she is the same nurse who tried to kill the elderly woman in the hospital. Joan kills Dr. Claire and leaves. We return to Mira, who finds an email from a person named David. He says he got her email address from the mental rehabilitation center and that his son suffers from the same illness. He asks her to open her camera, and she does. When she asks him to do the same, he says he only has a profile picture, which is unclear. David starts talking to Mira about his son, who suffers from muscular dystrophy. Mira asks him how he takes care of him, and he tells her that he hired a nurse to take care of him because his wife passed away. David continues praising his nurse, saying how happy his son is with her and that, without her, he wouldn't know how to care for his son at all. Mira then starts telling him about the nurse they have, saying that she's really good. Then we move to Joel's room, and we discover that she is the one talking to Mira under David's name. She's using a voice-changing program, so Mira thinks she's speaking to a man. The next day, in the morning, Karen visits them while they're having breakfast. By accident, she spills a glass of juice on Todd's shirt, and it gets dirty. He goes to clean it, and Karen takes the shirt to wash it. Mira starts telling Karen about David, whom she met yesterday. While Karen was bringing something from inside, she catches a glimpse of something in the laundry room. She smells Todd's shirt, but Joel doesn't notice. However, Karen decides not to tell Mira so she doesn't cause any trouble in their home. At night, while Mira is in the kitchen, David calls again to check on her and Mira tells him she has a bit of a cold and the flu. David advises her to have the nurse check on her, saying the nurse at his place takes good care of him and his son, not just with his son, but with everything. Later, Joan goes to Mira in the kitchen and asks her who David is. Mira responds angrily. "Are you eavesdropping on me or what?" Joan laughs and changes the subject, saying she was just joking. Then Joan quickly grabs the dishwashing detergent from Mira's hands and tells her that it's not safe to use that one as it could poison everyone. Joan then meets Todd while he's coming down from upstairs and asks her about Mira. Joan, with a sly tone, says that Mira is in the kitchen, talking to a man named David. She tells him that Mira is part of a group that goes for treatments through participation. But Joan begins to suspect something and tells Todd that Mira almost washed the dishes with a poisonous detergent. Todd starts to defend Mira, saying she's been having trouble sleeping. Joan hugs him and says, "Good night." The next morning, Joan is in the kitchen. Todd enters and asks if Mira is still sleeping. He says he doesn't know what's wrong with her, as she has been sleeping a lot during the day, almost as if she's taking sleeping pills. Joan suggests that maybe she's talking to someone at night, like David, but Todd says that even if that's the case, he trusts her. Mira wakes up to find Joan has prepared breakfast, and starts to feel that Joan is trying to take her place in the house and win over her husband and son. However, she has no solid proof of that, so she stays quiet but feels deep down that Joan is planning something. Todd asks Mira to sleep less at night, especially since she hasn't slept in her bed but on the couch. Joan brings her tea to wake her up and get her refreshed. After Todd leaves for work, Mira starts talking to Joan, but suddenly she gets dizzy and falls to the floor. Joan helps her and sits her down on the couch to rest. Mira asks her not to tell Todd that she fainted and says she wants to see a doctor. Joan reassures her and promises not to tell Todd anything. Joan then asks Mira if she can take a blood sample from her to do some tests and check if she's suffering from any illness. That night, Joan talks to David as usual. Mira tells him that the detergent she almost used could have poisoned them all, while Joan does all the work at the house. David starts responding, but Mira stops him and warns him not to repeat it again. Then, Todd comes in to check on Max and asks Mira to go with him, but she feels dizzy and can't see clearly. She says, "Just a minute, I'll catch up." Then Mira grabs her phone and sees a message saying that David is a fraud, but she's not focused and falls asleep. The next morning, Toad and Max wake up, and he finds her still sleeping on the couch, just like he left her the night before, with her phone in her hand. He gets a bit frustrated, takes the phone from her, and checks it. He sees the message she received, which says that David is a fraud, but it came from a strange number. She wakes up shortly after, and Mira comes over to sit with her. Mira tells her that she's tired and hasn't been sleeping much, and Joan tries to convince her that she's just exhausted, but nothing more, and rest is the best thing to help her recover. Mira thanks her afterward for taking care of them, but Green says she's happy about it because this is the family she has always dreamed of. Just then, Mira gets a message from the person who told her David is a fraud, and it includes an address. Joan asks her about it, and Mira says it's from someone who sent a message to her and the entire therapy group, advising them not to deal with David anymore. Joan gets worried because the situation is starting to unravel. Mira replies to the number, asking them not to contact her again and telling them to stop bothering her with messages. She then goes to work, where she tells her friend Karen that the results of her blood test came back normal, and there's nothing wrong with her, just maybe a bit of rest needed. Karen advises her to take the test again but not through Joan, because she's suspicious of her and doesn't trust her. Mira then receives an email from David's real account, sent to all the members of the rehabilitation center. It says that his account was hacked, and someone has been impersonating him. He asks them to stop dealing with him. Mira sends him a message asking him not to contact her again, but he replies saying that her son is in danger and he urgently needs to speak with her in person. Joan advises Mira to meet him, but in a public place, since she doesn't know him. At home, Toad overhears a conversation between Mira and Joan about the man who sent the email. He hears that Mira is going to meet someone at a cafe the next day and starts to believe that his wife is cheating on him. Joan advises Mira not to meet him, but Mira goes ahead to the cafe the next day to meet the real David. David tells her that he doesn't have any children and has no idea who hacked his account and impersonated him. He shows her a picture of his wife, who passed away the previous month due to cancer. He explains that his wife had been undergoing chemotherapy regularly until last month when she started talking to someone online who convinced her that her recovery was hopeless, leading her to stop taking her medicine. David thinks that this person might be the one impersonating him and could be the one contacting Mira pretending to be David. As they leave the cafe together, Toad, who has been watching them, believes that his wife is indeed cheating on him, especially when he sees David hugging Mira. He calls Joan to tell her that he saw them together, but Joan is busy giving Karen a poison injection in her car, leaving her to die while pretending to be upset about the situation. Then, Karen went to visit Mira at her house, but Mira told her she was in a meeting. However, Karen was suspicious because she hadn't mentioned this meeting before. Karen had come to show her a design related to her work, but Mira took the design from her at the door and refused to let her inside. Karen said she wanted to talk to her for a bit, then took the design back and entered the house. She started telling Mira that she was kind, but she couldn't see people's true nature well, and that she knew what Gwen was planning. Gwen got very angry and said, "How dare you say that in my house?" Karen was surprised by the word house, and replied, "By the way, I saw you smelling Tot's shirt, but I didn't tell Mira to protect your relationship with her son." Then, Karen threatened her, saying that any bad behavior toward the family or any attempts to destroy it would make Gwen the one who shuts everything down. She then left and headed toward the door to leave. But before she could exit, Gwen came in with a flower pot and hit Karen on the head, knocking her unconscious. At that moment, Tot was watching David leave the hotel, so he decided to call Gwen and tell her he had seen Mira cheating. Meanwhile, Gwen had injected Karen with poison and left her in the car. She then got out of the car to continue talking to Tot as if nothing had happened. Afterward, Mira sent Tot a message telling him she would be late for dinner and asked him to eat alone. Max, her son, came into the room after returning from his physical therapy session, and Gwen took the knife from Mira without her noticing. The knife had Myra's fingerprints on it. Before she left, Gwen asked Mira if she was going to have dinner with her, but Mira told her she was going to meet a friend. Gwen then headed to the hotel where she met David, and it turned out that Gwen had been the nurse for his wife, whom she had convinced not to take treatment by impersonating the person she had spoken with before her death. Gwen then started putting on gloves, and when she confessed to David what she had done to his wife, he grabbed her. But she pulled a knife from her bag, which had her fingerprints on it, and killed David with it. After that, she adds a little bit of Myra's blood that she took from her as a sample. She leaves and exits the place. Toby returns home, drunk, and finds Gwen waiting for him. Mira is asleep, and Toby wants to ask her, "Hey, Aunt," but Gwen tells him to come upstairs to change his clothes and continue their conversation. They go upstairs to the room. Gwen tries to help him change clothes, but he tells her he doesn't need any help. She tries to get closer to him and tells him she's lonely at home since the house is big. She tells him that he deserves someone better than Mira. But despite being drunk, Toby rejects her advances and tells her he wants to rest. He asks her to go downstairs and sleep in her place. She gets upset, feeling insulted despite everything she's done to help her relationship with Mira. But he still doesn't want to betray her. Mira wakes up from her sleep to find a cup of tea in front of her with a note from Gwen. It says that she took Max to school and will take him to his therapy session afterward. Mira tries calling Karen but finds her phone off. Then, Mira receives a message from the fake David, and she notices a phrase in the message that David always used. She also remembers that phrase being written on the note Mira had left, making her suspicious about the situation and suspecting Gwen's involvement. Mira pours the tea into the sink and notices a strange substance in it. She enters Gwen's room and finds a book explaining poison compositions. She starts searching through the room for pills and finds some hidden narcotics under the bed. She begins to connect the dots, realizing that Gwen has been putting drugs in her tea, and suspects she's doing all of this to take her place in her life and steal her husband. Gwen returns from school and greets Mira like nothing's wrong. Gwen is surprised that Mira seems so awake today, asking why. Mira tells her she just woke up and needs to relax on the couch for a bit, and offers to make her more tea. Gwen talks to Mira normally, trying to not raise any suspicion, while Mira secretly searches on her phone to understand the effects of the drugs Gwen has hidden. At that moment, Gwen walks in and asks what she's searching for. Mira lies, saying she's looking for hair care products. Gwen then insists on taking Max to his therapy session, and Mira tries to stop her, but Gwen is determined. Mira feels she can't stop them, especially since Max is comfortable and wants to go. Later, Mira enters Gwen's room and records a video on her phone, explaining everything she discovered about Gwen in case something happens to her. Afterward, Mira quickly dresses and calls Toby. However, she's shocked when he confronts her about her relationship with David. She tries to explain the truth to him, saying that everyone is in danger and that her priority now is getting Max because the boy is in danger. She ends the call and contacts the police. As she leaves the house, she finds Gwen returning. Gwen notices Mira's actions and asks where her phone, bag, and keys are. Mira says she left them on the table and asks where Max is. Gwen says she left him at his session, but Mira notices a blood stain on Gwen's face. Gwen calmly wipes it off. Mira tries to grab her phone from the table and leave, but Gwen stops her, saying she won't tell her where Max is unless Mira gives up her phone. Mira is forced to comply. Gwen takes her outside to the car, and on the way, Mira asks why she's doing this. Gwen tells her that Mira hasn't appreciated the blessings she has. Her husband and son are more important than the job she's neglected her son for. Gwen says she should have taken care of her son herself instead of handing him over to someone she didn't know. That's why Gwen decided to take her place and her family, to take Toby and Max away from her. Meanwhile, Toby returns home, finds the door open, and notices a phone. He sees the video Mira recorded earlier. Gwen then takes Mira to her house. There, Gwen admits that she killed her friend Karina, also killed David, and the doctor. She's willing to kill anyone who stands in her way to get what she wants, Toby and his family. Mira asks about Max, and Gwen says he's fine and that she has won. Mira tells her to think about it. Will Max believe Gwen when she takes him from their lives? Gwen tells Mira she killed David, and her fingerprints are on the knife, along with the blood sample she took from him and smeared on it. Gwen also says she killed the germ in the cafe they met, ensuring there would be no gaps in the case. Mira is terrified and tries to escape, but Gwen grabs her and ties her up. Gwen gets a knife from the kitchen to kill Mira, but Mira fights back, grabs a pot, and strikes Gwen on the head. She escapes from the house, gets in her car, and drives away, calling the police. The nightmare with Gwen ends there, and Mira returns to her family, realizing that some people are mentally ill and resent seeing others happy. She starts her life over, but this time, she's learned that her home is more important than her job. The movie ends here. If you like the movie, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.